Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette DeVidar. Welcome to Smart Sustainability on Sunday, February 20, 2022. Wow, the carousel of happenings is speeding and speeding up, which makes it really hard to address topics that touch all of us short and long term, such as housing. With a disappearing middle class, inflation the highest it's been in 40 years, local communities are facing their own set of problems with housing and home ownership equity going forward. Add to that the growing discrepancy between rich and poor, and the question comes up, is affordable housing still possible? How can we counteract the challenges and what's out there to make housing further affordable, particularly in communities where space is tight, such as Hawaii? Our topic tonight, good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nicolette DeVidar. Traditionally, home ownership is an important anchor to stability and the creation of wealth in America. Facing the rising economic and demographic circumstances, the dynamic of remote work, and people exiting large cities and moving around, are we in a time where we have to give up our dream of owning your own home or redefine it? What does housing mean for communities, and particularly for communities with fixed boundaries like islands, where natives are more and more forced to move out, while part-time rich homeowners move in and leave homes vacant for a significant time of the year? How does that impact the overall well-being of the community? Joining us tonight from Hawaii is Ernesto Simões. He's a real estate developer who also founded the Ohana Program Foundation, a community organization that helps with affordable housing solutions through condo projects and creative real estate investments to make responsible housing solutions possible. We have Moana Buer, president of the Ohana Program Foundation. She's a native Hawaiian descendant of Kauai Hapai on the north shore of Oahu, who has worked for 25 years across public, private, and nonprofit organizations, where she developed and implemented conservation, environmental education, and community engagement programs. And we have Fernando Bastos, an award-winning home ownership association manager who actually partook or used the program, so to speak, who can walk us through the process and make us understand. Thanks so much for all of you to join us on Smart Sustainability. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So
Aloha.
Aloha, that's right. We all love your backgrounds, and telling you coming right out of DC, so to speak, I think we can all use a little warmth and sunshine and ocean. But that aside, let's dive right in. I want to get straight to the point, actually. Ernesto, what are the big housing issues in Hawaii?
Well, Hawaii, of course, being an island and being one of the best places in the world to travel and visit, it attracts a huge demand for real estate. And having said that, especially after COVID, the affordable housing and the offers for the community has really got smaller. Prices have pretty much rose 30-35% the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And you have a very strong competition from VA buyers. Hawaii has, I think, 10-12% of military residents, mm-hmm. And second residence home buyers. At the same time, because of its focus on sustainability, it's very hard to develop new housing here in Hawaii. So all that combined creates a very strong shortage. Mm-hmm. Prices go up and will continue to go up. And sometimes, adding to that and what you said, you have a huge portion of the population here, the working force, that not only has struggles to qualify for loans, sometimes they lack instruction, directions, care, education to be able to qualify to a loan. And because of that, we decided to on our affordable housing developments. When I say affordable housing for Hawaii, we're talking about $1 million or $1.2 billion.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's affordable housing in Hawaii?
Believe it or not, Oahu average home price just hit $1.05 million for single-family homes. So in our personal, in the company's vision, we see below 1.2, below 1.1 million affordable. As crazy as it sounds, it is the market here. And we saw all that, and you know, we're very thankful for everything Hawaii has given us, that we decided to start helping local families by removing the stress of the home purchasing process, and by guiding them through how to get financing, how to organize their personal finance so they can get a loan, by giving them seller credits to help them with closing costs and down payments, and basically guiding them from start until they sign their homes with us. And another end result of that is that not only they end up buying their homes, and you know, but they also are obligated to reorganize their personal and family finances to focus on investing in real estate, which will have a major impact on their lives. So we started doing that on our own developments. And when we saw the results, which is, you know, you see a young family that had no hope on buying a house, actually buying a house and changing their lives, we understood that we needed to take that a step beyond. And now we're creating the Ohana Foundation. And that foundation is completely separate from our business, our development business. Moana is the president, and you know, no one with more credentials, and especially being a woman, we all know that who holds the Ohana together are the women. And she knows Hawaii better than anybody, knows the struggle. She also works in real estate. So that's why we're creating the foundation, to be able to spread the word and to do what we did with our developments, you know, to more and more families.
I want to move on to Moana, but I have a question actually straight off the bat. Now, when you look at $1 million homes, that's a pretty, you know, steep line, so to speak. When you look at the salaries, where are the salaries in comparison to the home price? Fernando, actually, I'm going to call right on you on this one, because you probably can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so probably in Hawaii, it is the largest gap.
Hang on a second. We cannot seem to get the audio in. Let's try that again. Can you do it again?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, you're in. We can hear you.
All right. So I believe Hawaii probably is the biggest gap between earnings and real estate. So, and that's create a huge gap, because people getting $12 an hour, $15 an hour, maybe 20. Some other people maybe get a little bit more. So how in the world you'll be able to afford $1 million house?
Exactly.
So it's a very difficult situation for the locals, and that's the reality of Hawaii. So we are being priced out of paradise.
Yeah.
And just for people to know, Ohana means family, but it means family in a way that you really care, we really love. It doesn't have to be blood relative, it can be friends. And so just for people to know, we've been talking about Ohana program. So Ohana means family.
Yeah. Nicolette, just to make a small correction or adjustment, that $1 million median price range, it's $1.05 million that I mentioned, that's for Oahu. But if you go to the Big Island of Oahu, you still can buy a brand new single family home, 1,200 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, for under $400. And even here on Oahu, we've been selling homes between $700 and $800, which is, you know, it's not $1 million, but it's still expensive.
Yeah. But it's a little bit more doable. It sounds at least a little bit more doable.
Yes, one of the areas that we plan to be developing projects, we understand that there will be a huge need to do public-private partnerships where we have to be creative. So right now, we are trying to replicate a very awesome, 100% sustainable Airstream mobile park that was done in Austin, Texas. We want to bring that concept to Hawaii. And our idea is to maybe use public land. We do all the development. We create a sustainable living with green energy, catchment for water, farming to provide food. And then we bring in a special financial institution to be able to finance that to local families. So at the end of the day, that can be a temporary, up to 5 or 10 years housing solution till they get prepared to step up, and at a decent month cost, and they're actually buying something instead of just renting also.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to move on here to Moana. Moana, you're the president of the Ohana Program Foundation. So what does the foundation do? What's its main goal? I mean, we heard a little bit from Ernesto, but from your perspective, what's the main goal?
So the main goal is to get our local residents here in Hawaii into housing so that they can stay, get them into a place where they are comfortable enough, one, in a housing situation that's stable so that they're not having to look to move to the mainland or other places away from their families. And two, to really help them in the process of getting there. So a lot of times here in Hawaii, and other places, there's a culture of multi-generational living, and it can be a couple of reasons. There's cultural beliefs behind that. There's also cost effectiveness, and being able to change that narrative a little bit, or at least share the stability that homeownership brings, is one key component to what we're doing. And the other part is also educating not just our local people in the process of home ownership, and as Fernando shared, connecting all the dots and kind of having everything in one space, but also educating other real estate developers in the islands on how important it is to really focus on keeping our local residents here, because we are already seeing our working class, our middle class diminish. Because of the affordability of living here. And it's really important to, home ownership's important. And then we're also, as an island, we only have so much space, as you mentioned at the beginning, and thinking really strategically how we can utilize already developed urban spaces and maximize the living for people in those areas, but also protecting our resources.
That actually brings up a really interesting point, because when you have such limited space, isn't there a point where, for example, a local government or the island itself kind of should perhaps determine what percentage is really open for real estate to buy and what is not? I mean, what's ready for locals and what's ready for others coming in? And I know this is always a hard question because you want to go with the market and things like that. But when you have a limited space, what do you think?
I am in full agreement of that. And that's difficult because if you were to do that, you would probably have an economic crash for a period of time. And where's the fine line in the balance? And I think that there are conversations in our legislation. There's all kinds of movement with affordable housing, but it does come down to, each island has kind of a sustainable development plan. And there's certain areas that have been listed as urban and as rural and as agricultural, and where urban sprawl may or may not be appropriate. And those conversations constantly change and shift with the needs. So you're spot on in that. And
I'm going to have to give you, we seem to have, Zoom is acting up, so we seem to have the sort of sometimes audio issues coming in and out. So don't be surprised when I ask you to repeat it at times, because we seem to get some sound bites lost here in the process. Okay? Yeah. Now, then another question. You mentioned multi-generational living is really important, and I totally understand that, because to me, when you look at those housing prices, for a single person, my God, that's really a lot to stem. So you have to have, I suppose, several incomes to make this happen. Now, are most of the clients or customers that Ohana works with, are these multi-generational families to begin with?
I think there's several different groups. Ernesto, I think I'm going to let you respond to that.
Not necessarily. So far, the families we helped were people that we are friends or friends of friends, and that we just, felt the need to give them a hand to buy their homes. And of course, we will always give priority to families that are living here, producing here, and want to stay here. So it doesn't make sense for us to do that with somebody that doesn't have those goals, that's not active in the economy. And going back to a previous point, I think we need to talk about an example. And I think what the private sector needs to do is to work together with the government, because I don't see that happening here. Well done. And just to give you an example, what happened, the government created a bill called Bill 89 recently, about 2 years ago. And that was to restrict vacation rental in residential areas. And the whole concept behind that was to create affordable housing. But guess what? That didn't work at all. Actually, what happened was the opposite. Those houses that could not do vacation rental anymore ended up being bought by second home wealthy people. And you actually cut a really important income stream for local families to buy a house. Because before that law, a local family could buy a house, live upstairs, and rent downstairs to you, Nicolette, when you come here to visit beautiful Hawaii. And they would make another 2-3K a month. And then they could afford, answer your question, then they could afford making $20 an hour plus the rental income, they could afford a $1 million house. Now, they don't have that option anymore. Neither the government provided them support. So I think private sector, we need to push to get things done, because just by creating restrictions, it's not going to help. And the proof of that is that law. I take, for example, where Moana lives, it's the North Shore of Oahu. Imagine a beachfront house that's worth $5, $7, $10 million in front of a famous surf spot. That house will never be a solution for affordable housing. Let's say some local family was owning their house and they have a very expensive mortgage that was being paid through tourism income by renting it out. Oh, they cannot do that anymore. That's going to be sold most likely for somebody that's not from here, that's going to buy as a second home, and what I call a dead buyer, because that buyer, which part of the game, we welcome them to Hawaii and everything, but he's not producing, he's not creating jobs, he's not actively heating up the economy here. And like you said, really well done, labor is starting to become a very serious problem for Hawaii.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So the private sector needs to push a little bit more. Are you the outlier on this one, Ernesto? Or is this more like a coming together and pushing more sort of for that?
Well, no, I'm not. We're just a small company growing, We are medium-sized developer investment company here in Hawaii. I always think the big dogs here in Hawaii, which are very few, which actually have political influence to do more, should do more, and we are trying to help the most that we can, We are going to be working together with Moana, with the Ohana Foundation, to try to create smart developments to focus on affordable housing on a decent way,
Yeah.
That we can add a nice living, a green living with sustainability, and at the same time have an easy monthly payment and fix the problem. Right now, we know that there's a lot of government land that has no use, that we can do something very smart, sustainable, and fix 1, 2, 3, 5,000 families' problems if we work together. So we're walking in that direction, but one step at a time, because we have our limitations as a small company here.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. Now, Fernando, you have used the program. Let me start with this one. Why is home ownership? What does home ownership mean to you? Why is it so important?
As an immigrant, we always hear the American dream, which is a house. And I think it's everybody's dream. Once you have a family, I have a daughter, so you wanted to own your own house, and it has been extremely difficult. Even though I've been here in Hawaii 25 years, so most of my life I've been in Hawaii, working, being very successful, and having very good earnings. It's still very difficult for me to be able to buy a house. And going through the Ohana program, it was the first time I feel that it was a hands-on solution. Because I've been in other non-profit organizations, but they are more information, and you get overwhelmed with information. You don't know, as a first home buyer, you don't know. It's like almost you never had coffee before, and you go to Starbucks and you look at all those things. Wow, okay, you don't know really what it's your case. And through the Ohana program, so you feel that people looking at your situation, talking to you, and then help you to find the different kind of loan or others government incentives that can help you to achieve your dream. So that's the only reason I have a house now. It is because the Ohana program. Otherwise, I would not have a house.
Yeah. Now,
so I'm very, very grateful for them.
Exactly. Now, when I looked at your profile, and you're actually managing quite a portfolio, so you have a pretty responsible job. Did I see you have an MBA as well?
Yes.
So
I'm.
Yeah. So let me bring something up, because that to me, I actually was pretty revealing also, because when we think in DC and in other areas, when we think of affordable housing, people automatically in their minds think about low-income family, and then very often with people who are less educated. But that's not the case. So obviously, the clientele is much more. How should I say this, on a broader basis and more diverse, for example. So how can you effectively work with such a diverse and different need and client base? Mona, I'm going to toss that question to you.
So I think that, part of the process is really understanding, as Fernando shared. It's not just here's a bunch of information, here's a link, go here. It's really sitting with each of the participants in the program, learning more, like getting very intimate with them, learning more about them, and then being there every step of the way, so that when they're having, challenges, they're not thwarted, or they don't become what's the word I'm looking for? Discouraged, because it's very onerous. It's a very difficult process to go through, whether you have an MBA or you don't, or you have a PhD.
Right.
And so I think that being there every step of the process is really important, and being able to tailor the needs of our participants in the program is hugely important. And I think that the diversity of the group of people that we have involved is definitely has built a strong Ohana or team for us to do that.
Yeah, I bet, because that seems to be really, really wide when you look at your local community, when you look at all sorts of different people there. I can definitely see that. Now,
there's a point that I
Yeah.
want to call out, Nicolette. I think it's important before I forget.
Yeah.
We helped over 20 families so far,
Right.
right? And like I said, when I say we helped, we went all the way with them until they bought their house. None of them got a mortgage from a local bank.
Wow. That's amazing.
And then when you turn on your TV,
Yeah.
all 3 or 4 major local banks, they're advertising it's a local family spreading aloha and love. Reality is, they, like you said, if somebody just doesn't have enough education or information or encouragement, they're not welcome at an underwriting department of the local banks. And they get rejected because of something simple. So I just imagine if a local bank, okay, that should be doing this, said, okay, we're gonna put a director here just to help our locals to get ready for us to give them loans to buy their homes. So it's a very cold system, and especially with COVID, you had a lot of people here in Hawaii losing jobs.
Yeah.
It's a tourism related industry, right? So
Yeah.
And that became even worse, oh no, if you're not if you don't have steady income for the last 3 years, we're not giving you a loan. No, that's not true, because all of our buyers got the best rates and loans possible. What we did, we partnered with this amazing lender. It's a young guy, hungry guy, and he just doesn't get tired. He goes after one after the other, and actually they're creating a foundation to help educate people and prepare them to get the loans.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing that needs to be called out, because it is true. And look at that data. Everybody we helped that bought homes and got amazing. I'm not talking about people getting shark loans. I'm talking about primary home loans. Fernando's loan, I think he put 3% down, and we gave them seller credits.
Yeah.
So no local banks. Everybody was rejected by local banks.
Yeah, and I can actually really totally see that also, if you're, particularly when you're a first home buyer, you've never been through the process, it can be pretty intimidating for people to go out and not knowing how to best approach this, not knowing how to navigate this. And even it doesn't matter how educated you are or not, but you're still kind of in this predicament. So Ohana, and I think this is also what I love about the name, by the way, this is where this family approach, I think, really fits best or describes the program really well, because you talked about the warmth, you talked about encouragement, you talked about walking people through education-wise, and also in terms of what to expect. So that seems to me is a really first start. It is a really great first start. Now, can everyone or anyone who is in Hawaii, also on the other islands, for example, approach you and start the process?
Yes, we've had several people since we've kind of launched the foundation inquire and be interested. We currently, and Ernesto, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we currently have inventory here on Oahu, Maui, and nothing on Kauai yet.
Big Island also.
Big Island, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is there an investment criteria? Like, what are the criteria, for example, with whom you partner? Have you had people where you'd say it doesn't work out for us?
I think, this is something that Moana will decide, and based on common sense. But the end goal is to help local families. When I say local families, you don't have to be a Hawaiian family. Like Fernando, he's an immigrant, but he's been here 25, 30 years. He has, his daughter was born here. He helps the economy. He has love for this place. He deserves a house here. You know, he is a local. So I think our goal, I mean, at least for me, when I see more satisfaction is helping families that deserve a house and are just outcast from this brutal system and this brutal competition. You know, it's like, you know, as much as we can say, hey, hang on, this one, just because we can, you're gonna sell to this guy. You know, even if we make a little less money, still good for us. We're still making a profit. You know, we gotta make a profit to keep going and keep doing this more. But there's, you know, it's priceless when you see that happening, and that's what motivates us to keep doing it and keep spreading this.
Absolutely. Fernando, how long did the process, do you remember how long the whole process took when you went there from start to finish?
So my process was a little longer because that's another thing that Ohana offered to me. So in the part of the development, I already fell in love with the house. I want to do everything in my power to get it. Let's do this thing. So they let me to be a part of the renovation, which is another amazing thing because it's your house, it's your dream.
Yeah.
So not only I get the financial part.
That would be a big selling point for me, by the way.
Yeah, so I could
Yes.
do, hey, can you just do a listing
Yes.
here, a little thing there. So it was really nice. So with that said, I would say we started this process about 5 months. But if it wasn't for that, I would say it would be about 2 months, 3 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was the whole, once we have everything online, everything was fast.
Yeah. Now I want to talk a little bit about the process so people actually know what to expect, Moana, when someone approaches you. Can you walk us through?
So if somebody, somebody were to approach us about purchasing a home through the Ohana Program Foundation, we would first connect them with a lender. We would share with them, you know, these are some of the contacts. And then they would, and I think to go back real quick to Fernando's point, and it can be 2 months, it may be a little bit longer depending on your independent situation. I think that there's some people who might, you know, whether it's creditworthiness or getting creative with the financing, whatever might need to happen, they may need to take a little bit longer to get to that point. Which is also a beautiful part with the foundation is we have that flexibility and that ability to kind of work with different timelines. And Ernesto, jump in if I'm not corrected in anybody this, but
we have a case here, which is actually a friend of mine that it's interesting. Carol, single mom, she's a nurse, and she's a nurse in 2 of the main hospitals here. So she makes really, really good money. I would say she's making over 180K a year. Okay, she works a lot, single mom. And then she was like, Ernesto, help me to buy my first house and this and that. I make great money. So when we sent her to Chris, our in-house lender, that to start working on her file, he calls me, Mr. Ernesto, she's got 3 cars. You know, she just bought another car. Her credit cards, you know, I looked at the statement. She's spending a lot of money on user things, you know, clothes and traveling. And I'm like, she's never going to qualify if she doesn't change that. So I called her, Carol, listen, making a long story short, most likely you got to sell 2 out of your 3 cars. You don't need 3 cars. And you got to stop spending on your American Express and Louis Vuitton if you want to buy a home for your kids. And because she had the income, but she just did not have the financial discipline. So, you know, and she was at the same time single mom, working at 2 hospitals, busy life. So the side effect of the program was that Carol reorganized her finances. You know, she didn't know, but she was actually on a negative cash flow, and we made that we obligated her to stop that, to start actually making money without spending on user things, cars that she doesn't need, clothes that she doesn't need, to get ready to buy a house. And she bought one, now she's ready to buy a second one. So I think the side effect And like that story, we had another one, Rico, great guy, just bought his house with us, and he had to get rid of a huge monthly payment on a truck that he didn't need, you know? So I think the side effect, as Moana said, is the first step that we do is we take an X-ray of the situation, and then Chris makes an evaluation, and then we get back to the buyer and say, hey, you got the income or you don't have the income. You have to do this. We gotta hire this company to work on your credit. You gotta stop spending on these things. You gotta sell this car. Maybe you and your wife combined. We're gonna make the application together so you together qualify. We just educate them in a very friendly and nice way, and remove all that aggressiveness and cold, and cold and dry thing that the banks do.
Yeah, that
the
sounds
start.
really also very much like you help your clients develop a really good relationship to money, to the money and to their assets, actually.
Yeah.
Being financially responsible.
Yeah.
And yeah, so once they get through that process, Hawaii Bahia has a number of homes in their inventory, and then we, kind of match them with the property that would best fit them, that would best fit the whole picture. And part of that is keeping the inventory off the market so that they're also not met with that competitive scenario in real estate, right? So
yeah, because I was going to ask you about this actually. Yeah. How fast? I can imagine that once a house is on the market and you have this competitiveness, you have to make a decision like really, really fast. So I was going to ask you how you navigate that and manage that.
Right. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Mona. Well, just to give an example, Fernando's house, we sold his house for $900,000. Right, Fernando? And then I think his house was appraised for near $1 million. So he already made money as he purchased the house. But we did everything off market, working with him. On a normal situation, a developer would have hired a very smart realtor that would put the house for $1 million and would receive 30, 40, 50 offers. And then what happens is that they started a bidding war. Hey, you have a week to send your highest and best. And then it's just like a bidding war, and they don't see who's on the other side of the table. So we said we removed that, and then that's another point, how would Fernando be ready to participate in a bidding war with people with much more cash, much more desire, much more financial capacity to buy his house, and we have Ashley Moniz, which is one of the realtors that work with us, and she has a client that I think they lost 10 houses already, that they make offers and they get overbid and that after 10 houses that guy starts to get tired, and it's a family that's producing here, helping here, but if they don't get a house, they will end up moving out of Hawaii.
Yeah, and I think that's a real danger that a lot of people have to move off, right? That must be really hard, particularly for you, Moana, as a native there, to watch that process.
It is. It's very difficult. I mean, there's also the background cultural feeling of, as Hawaiians, we didn't believe in owning our own land for many years until the mehele happened, and lots of things in my own ancestral lineage have occurred where lands were lost. And so that's also another mindset of, this is the place that we're at. And so how can we ensure that our Native people have the opportunity to purchase homes? We do have, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs has a lending program that they offer for Native Hawaiians. Department of Hawaiian Homelands has lands that they develop for Native Hawaiians. However, a lot of those are funded through federal funding, and there's all kinds of bureaucratic red tape. And so homes aren't built in time for being needed, and which is huge. The inventory is not there. And then there's a bunch of, some of the lending programs are utilizing the local financial institutions, as shared both with Fernando and Ernesto, are not super friendly. It's a very cold process. There is not that warm feeling of like, let's help get you through this. You want to do this? We're here to help you every step of the way and help get you into a prime position so that you can own a home and be able to stay here with your family, not have to move away, and be able to continue life on Oahu, on Hawaii Island, throughout the state of Hawaii. It's really important, and it's difficult because Hawaiian people, we have lost a lot of different things, a lot of parts of our culture. And, it shifts into what does homeownership mean then at this stage in 2022?
Yeah, exactly. And that actually was that would have been one of my next questions also, in terms of what does home ownership mean in 2022. Let's talk a little bit about the impact on communities. But before we go into that, I have one question for Fernando that I really wanted to know. So, how did you feel when you got the house? Can you still recall and describe it briefly?
It's hard because you work hard and then what happened to you is almost impossible to happen, and it did happen. It's just stay on this shocking. You see every single detail of the house. I walk slowly in the house, looking everything in disbelief. So you just it's such a bliss, it's such a beautiful moment in your life. I see my daughter, I see my wife, I see my cat, and say family. So I do have as a dream, all this thing now makes sense. I have I have a roof under my head, and it's beautiful, it's nice, it's indescribable feeling.
Yeah. Now, I know I wanted to talk about sort of like the impact on communities, but I also want to address, before we go there, one other question for Moana or Ernesto, one of the two. It's when you work with multi-generational families, for example, and I'm particularly thinking now about Native Hawaiians, for example, because really, those home prices are they're very, very high when you think about this compared to salaries and things like that. So when you have a whole family or more people that you basically have to take under your wings and walk them through the process, that seems that also from a human point of view, that's quite a challenging and mediating process, is it not? Just to regulate among family members and then or whoever wants to live together, and then also sort of look at the different incomes and at the different expectations and at the different investment goals, maybe long term. How do you navigate that?
It can be hard. We had some interesting situations, especially in the Kalihi. Which Kalihi is it's where the heart of the affordable housing problem in Honolulu is, and we developed 10 houses over there that all of them went to the Ohana program. And one of the families, at one point I had to go there myself and call a family reunion. They brought their pastor, and I'm like, listen, guys, either you guys get along and we're gonna, navigate through this, or I'm gonna stop here because I'm getting tired, and you guys need to stop fighting and uniting. So do you guys want to do this or not? And that day, they left their differences from the past away. And I said, we got to focus on getting this done. And having said that, I think the problem here, as Moana stated, is that there's a gap between the theory, the programs, the advertising of the banks, and the end result. And part of what our style is to get things done. I like to add that to the Ohana program, we bring a lot of immigrant, mentality on getting things done, and that's we're very proud of that too, because that gap between the theory and the reality is huge in Hawaii. You do have programs, you do have good intentions, but if there's no execution, there's no result. You know?
And it
We
sounds
at the-
also time-wise, process-wise, there's a real big difference, right? The gap seems to be really big.
Exactly. And that's
So
why we
let's talk a
try
little bit
to.
about the impact on communities. When you look at, you know, a lot of the percent, do you know the percentage of houses that are used as part-time residences or homes? By any chance?
Not off, I don't know off the cuff. It's
Just roughly, so we have an idea.
varies by island pretty broadly, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean.
So when you look at the impact on the communities, for example, and that goes back to losing a lot of the cultural values and the culture of your, as a native particularly, when you have to move out. When you compare that, for example, to a lot of those residences that people buy and they love to have a vacation home, and who wouldn't want to have a vacation home on Hawaii? But let's talk a little bit about the impact to the communities there.
So I think there's several impacts. One in particular, so as Ernesto shared earlier and you shared, I live out on the North Shore of Oahu, and it's historically a pretty transient location where there's only a handful of local people that still live, or native in particular, still live out here. And one of the biggest impacts is having that neighborly sense of I look out for my neighbor and they look out for me and our children. It's kind of like that village perspective of everybody knows one another. We're here to take care of one another. And when you have half of the population or half of the homes in a neighborhood per se, which is pretty true out here on the North Shore in some neighborhoods where they're part-time residents, and not even thinking about the vacation rental component, but just thinking about homes that sit empty often, there's not that sense of neighborly looking out for one another, that safety and security that is given within a small, tight-knit community. And like my neighborhood, for example, I have lived here in this neighborhood off and on over the past 25 years, and I can say there's a handful of people who still reside in this neighborhood. The turnover has been really huge. That handful has continued to keep a network together in a neighborly fashion, but you miss that part. And then you also have, when you're thinking about schools and you're thinking about jobs, you know, Haleiwa is a small town. Talking about especially COVID, where we've lost a lot of our workforce because the wages aren't high, because businesses have closed down. As people have moved away, there's a little bit of uncertainty into what our future looks like. And you don't have, you know, there's the conversation of circular economy. And if there's people not putting into our local mom and pop stores because they're not here year round, then what happens? Things start, it's kind of that trickle down effect, right? So I think that there's large impacts on community. If I think about Wai'anae on the west side, which is a very large Native Hawaiian population, there is homestead land out there. There's also private lands that are owned out there. And it's been historically kind of a lower price point and real estate thought process. And it's starting to change because inventory elsewhere, either people have gotten so priced out or the inventory is nil, people are heading out to the west side, and that's starting to drive prices up over there where some of our local families might potentially be able to afford a home, and especially through our program. So that's a couple of thoughts on the impact on community.
Yeah, because that's like a real big cycle, so to speak. Once the prices go up, they go somewhere else, the prices go up. I mean, there's only so many things where you can actually go or escape to, unless you do, you know, what you're doing, what Ohana is doing, and you try to really cap this by helping people to get the real estate in Hawaii that particularly for the locals. I think that's a really big issue. Now, is this a concept that could be replicated elsewhere? Do you know of any?
I think so. I think the concept is, you know, if any developer, you know, anywhere wants to help local families because of certain reasons, like the same reasons we have here, you know, It's possible. We just need, it's going to take, it's going to give us a little more work. We're going to make a little less profit. But, in exchange, I think we're providing not only, we're helping a little bit in the long-term sustainability of our society here in Hawaii, and the joy that we get by seeing what happened to Fernando, it's worth it, at least for us. Going back to your previous point also, it is possible to do organized high-end developments here. There's a part of Kauai, south of Kauai, called Poipu, where it's an opportunity zone. It's a resort opportunity zone. It's very organized. You have 10, 30, $50 million second homes there being sold, mostly to non-residents, of course. And at the same time, there's a well-thought workforce housing, affordable housing. All the workers to support the hotels and the resort zoning area are very well integrated. The culture is there. So you can do it in an organized way, It's just a matter of planning and working together with the government.
Now, when you say working together with the government, from your experience, what are some of the things that could be changed to make this more effective, for example?
Well, right now, to be honest with you, I think if the city and the government only were able to give us the documents, and Moana works, besides the Ohana Foundation, her private job, she's a designer and an architect, and she helps us with all the developments, CPRs. She knows, and she can tell you better than me what she goes through to get things done here.
All right. Okay.
We had, if we helped 25 families, if we had a little more support, we could have done that for 100 families. But at the same time, us as an investor, as a developer, I'm taking a huge risk. I'm getting loans. I have investors that I have to pay back. To do all this, it's a lot of stress on our end because we got to do everything in a certain time frame. So Moana, on the other hand, I'm calling her, hey, where we are with our permits? And she's at the front face of all that inefficiency that just delays, the process and then limits the amount of help we can do and more housing we can provide. But that's a question for Moana.
Yeah, a lot of the challenges we do face are definitely, they're just quickly our state and our city not communicating well to one another. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to obtaining permits for certain things. If a purchase, say Hawaii Bahia purchases a property and they would need to go in and renovate because it's in shambles, there's a certain timeline that would be wonderful if we could operate in, but we've gone through a place where receiving permits to do even a small renovation may take us 6 months to a year, where it should only take a couple of weeks. It's really not. When we've got, my partners and I have everything in-house as far as getting the design part, going together, making sure we're laying things out really cleanly. When we go to the building department to say, hey, this is our plan, this is what you need, it should be a very quick turnaround. And we're not seeing that. One, yes, we could say COVID, but two, a lot of it is some of the rules and regulations that are in place that are not super clear. There's a lot of, our Hawaii revised statutes, our land use ordinances that are different. The state may have a land use ordinance for a property that says one thing, city and county has a different set of guidelines. And that's different, not just between the city and the state, but between the counties. So each island, each county has their own set of land use ordinances and rules and regulations that we have to follow. And so when Hawaii Bahia picks up a property and they go in and say, we want to do X, Y, and Z, let's do 6 to 9 months, we do everything we can to make that happen. And oftentimes it's not in our hands. We've done our work. We're waiting upon a planning and permitting issue. We're waiting on a correspondence from a wastewater branch. So there's a lot of those challenges. Those are the biggest challenges I think that we currently face.
So if you had to sum up like one rule that is a must go, that should go, so to speak, which one would that be?
Oh gosh.
I know that makes it hard, right?
I don't think there is just one. I think that there needs to be just a cleaner, streamlined process in all of the permitting. And that's what I could say is that we need to have a very clean, concise system in place, not us, but some of our county partners, in place where, you can walk in and say, hey, I'm doing this affordable housing project and these are the things that I need. I'm following, here's your guidelines and rules. They're all checked, all the boxes are done. Let's go. And so that streamlined process would be very helpful. It seems like the affordable housing word has brought in almost more red tape in some places, which is a little interesting. It has alleviated some things like water access and those kinds of things on some islands. But I think just a streamlined, clean system would be really nice and it'd be helpful.
Streamlining, but that's the hardest part. But actually, so let me ask Fernando on this one. So Fernando, when you worked through the process, what were the things that you would have said that could have been simplified, not from the Ohana Foundation, but the entire process that you walked through, so to speak?
Well, I was in good hands. So that's the main benefit of the Ohana. They guide me. But yeah, my house, it was at the very end, it was just a technical thing that one was in conflict to the other. But because I have the support of them, it was a physical thing on the house that has to be done. Very simple, not supposed to stall the process, but it did. But then, because we have all the team together, they just did what needs to be done, and boom. And then we certify what was required. So, yes.
Now we're almost out of time, so I do want to sum it up here very briefly. What's the best way to get in contact with you? Is that via email and the webpage? Yes.
We have, if you go to ohanaprogramfoundation.org, there is a link there to contact us. And we also are on Instagram currently and Facebook. So you can also private message us through there. But going to the website would probably be the easiest.
Okay, and so very briefly, in terms of documents, for example, it has to be really quick. What do people have to kind of have handy to go through the process? Can you sum it up really briefly?
The information we take really is contact information. We then connect them with our lender partners and they take it from there. So things like bank statement, W-2, all your regular financial documentation would go to your lender, and that would be the very first step.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you very much for all of you. That was great to have you on, and really great information. And I do invite people, of course, they're just out of curiosity, to go there, to go to the webpage, to look it up. And then those who are in Hawaii, my God, to take advantage of a program like this, because I think it's really important that we keep the cultural heritage, so to speak, in the places where they originate. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us, and thank you so much for watching tonight, and we'll see you next week. Have a good night.